Howdy, everyone. Patrick with the Webmaster Company and CodeCrunch.com here. CodeCrunch is an old project that we're sort of revamping and reusing as a Webmaster tutorials site. Okay, so this very first lesson, this very first free one, is called What Makes Websites Tick. That's the lesson inside of the Webmaster course itself. And the reason why teaching you what makes websites tick is important is because you have to understand the foundationals. Okay, that's what I'm seeing today is a lot of people, they know how to do WordPress, they know how to either do Wix or one of these other builders or Squarespace or something like that, and they can deploy a site and then they call themselves a web developer. That's not how it works, and that's not how I want you to learn. I want you to actually know what's going on underneath here, and so that's why I lay the foundation first by telling you what makes websites tick. So let's start there. The first thing you do when you type in something, okay, when you type in google.com, let's watch this screen here. Obviously, Google comes up, right? But why is that? Why does it work like that? Okay. Well, aside from the obvious answer, Google lives on a machine somewhere and there's a website there. It's routed through the internet through what's called the DNS, the domain name system, okay? And so I've drawn a hierarchy in a couple ways of how that works so you can better understand how websites work. Because once you understand how things work on a block level, you can then troubleshoot on that block level by simply removing blocks. It's the same, like when I was in the Marine Corps, I used to do, I was a 6492, that's my MOS, which is Precision Measurement Equipment Specialist. What that allowed me to do is take electronics in a block level and then sort of, fix very complex electronics like aircraft firing circuit test sets and things of that nature. By removing items and sections, and we'll call them blocks because they are, we can fix things. Well, you can do the same thing with websites, with pretty much anything in the world. But it works particularly well with websites because things are built on a fundamental block system in the webmaster world. So what makes websites tick? The domain name system is what makes it really start to tick, is because when you type in a name, how do we know, how does the internet know to get to that? So let's take a look. Okay. The first thing that happens when you type in your URL, google.com, is a request goes out to a set of servers. So let me give you a general overview of what's happening here, okay? Let's say I type in google.com, just like in this diagram, okay? And this is the actual server that Google lives on, okay? This is the data that you're seeing. So like when I type in Google, let's just open another window, okay? This here is presented by a machine somewhere, an actual server somewhere, okay? And so this is what's happening behind the scenes. When I type that in, this information is being retrieved. It's going to a DNS resolver, a domain name system resolver that tells us and answers this question. Answers a question such as, what is the IP assigned to this domain name? Where should we route this request? So this request is given an IP address, and it could be dependent on a number of things, and we'll go more into that later. But for now, all you need to know is that this root server, and different root servers are responsible for different regions of the world, and I'll show you that in a second. It answers with a number, okay? And that number is tied to a specific machine, for lack of a better explanation. So I pulled up this page here, what'smydns.net. I'll be sure to share the URL in the lesson or below in the words in the comments section below. When you type that in, when you type in Google, what's happening is it's routed through, to like I said, through a DNS machine here, a DNS resolver that tells us where should we route this request. Well, in Google's case, it's very complex, but I chose Google because everybody and their brother probably uses Google to some degree. So using this site, let's type in google.com just to see what we get, and then I'll sort of backwards explain these results. Now, what this site really is used for is a propagation checker. And what that means is, like, is the DNS, the domain name system, aware of any changes, or what is it reporting as the IP address, okay, across servers throughout the world? And you can see a visual representation here of these servers throughout the world. So when I type in Google, these are the IP addresses that these regions are reporting back, okay? So as you can see, Google has a very regional specific setup in a lot of ways because, of course, if you go like Google India, it's a different website. If you go to Google Romania, Google Italy, all these other things, other countries, they're going to come back with a different website. Now, in the case of, let's say, the Webmaster Company, let's just type that in. It'll be one single IP address, okay? Because that's all we use. We don't do any load balancing right now or anything like that because we don't have the need for it. And even if we did, we could still do it on a single IP address, but that's more, we'll save that for later for another lesson. Now, since this is reporting back that IP address, how do I know where this IP address belongs to? Now, let's go back to Google. Okay, and just randomly select an address. Now, what I've pulled up here is called ARIN. It's the American Registry for Internet Numbers. These numbers are what you end up going to when you type in an address. So when we type in Google, I can type in this number here, and let's see who it belongs to. Okay, cool. This number is assigned from ARIN. Okay, that's the source registry, this registry, to Google, and they own it. So as you can see, Google is assigning their own, of course they would, their own IP addresses to their websites. Okay, and if we select any random one, let's select another one that doesn't begin with necessarily the same number. Okay, Russia, for example. Okay, will that even show here? Is that a good question? So let's see here. Okay, source registry. So it is an American registration. Okay, while they may be in Russia or serving Russians, it's still an American IP address. So as you can see, when you type this in, that's what's happening. Okay, when you type in a domain name, it's getting routed to this DNS resolver. Okay, root servers and companies like that, companies like ARIN that are assigned these numbers and have root servers throughout the world. It's simultaneously talking to you and then telling you where to get that information from Google. So that's what happens. So let's take a look a little bit deeper now that we know that how the DNS and what's happening when you type in that domain name and how it's resolving to a number. When a website shows, there's multiple things happening here. We've already discussed the routing. So I've drawn this up as a simple triangulated diagram. Now don't take this to be any of the diagrams I draw up to be de facto standards or network standards or anything like that, because they're far from it. They're actually just meant to give you a visualization of how things work in an easy way until we get into deeper lessons, okay? So this initial lesson, we looked at the routing, okay, the DNS, the numbers assigned to a specific system, okay? Then you have coding, the code base that a site or a server is built on. So this here would be, the site and the server. It's written in HTML, and I'll show you that in a second. And then you have the actual website, this is the visual representation of that code and from the server that we see. So that's what makes websites tick. From DNS level up, it's pretty simple. Now, when I say that's what makes websites tick, obviously we're just talking about this one subsection of websites. It's very complex. Others, how APIs work, application programming interfaces, how other websites internally talk to each other, okay? It can be very confusing. That's why I'm doing this in a simple, singular representation method to show you one item at a time. So let's look this over from a broad overview, okay? I showed you how the DNS works, how these talk to each other and how this comes back and how Google is shown. So this leads us to, we know the routing now. Now we know the coding base to some degree, and we see the website. Now to understand the coding base and more about what I'm talking about, we'll get into that into another lesson, is if we were to view the page source here, okay, click view source, you'll see that this page is basically just a bunch of code. It's a bunch of HTML that's represented through CSS, which is cascading style sheets and other stuff. Now I don't want to get too far into the design side, but I wanted to show you this top layer of code here is representative of what we're looking at here, okay, between here and here. Here's the visual representation and here's the actual code, okay? So you have a very complex overview now of what makes websites tick, okay? In our next lesson, here's what we're going to look at. Next thing we're going to talk about is what kind of webmaster do you want to be? And it may seem like a trivial question, Like as I know here, it's a silly question, but it's meant to offer you a challenge, a concept of what you know about Webmaster and webmastering. Like I was stating earlier, what many people do is they run WordPress, and then all of a sudden they're this great webmaster, or they believe they are this great webmaster. And it is a good stepping stone for many people, but I don't want to detract from that. But it being WordPress, its accessibility has fooled a lot of people into believing that once they know that, and once they can run a WordPress site, that's what they do, and that's all they know how to do. I predate WordPress. I predate a lot of other CMS systems. But the point being is you just know one small system, okay? And WordPress happens to be it. And of course, I'll be using a lot of WordPress because it's easy to use, and over 60% of the market shares it. So that said, first lesson, what makes websites tick? We're done with this. It's very simple. Nice little intro to get you started. If you like what you hear so far, please jump into the next lesson. See you soon.